it's really interesting where that shows up is that if you actually go to the trouble of digging through and finding out who owns the publishing companies, you
Right.
know, like way back there, with Hachette and stuff, you'll end up with this huge French megalith that also owns water purification plants. It's just like these big, huge corporations that own publishing. It's just like one kind of venture that they're in. So, and that
Yeah.
that makes the bean counters kind of king of the
Yeah,
roost.
no, that's been going
But
on since the 70s if you kind of study the history. And I've sort of like just I'm a total nerd, so I've read all about like, publishing history and, in the 20th century. And when you go back to like, Simon and Schuster, it used to be Paramount because they were owned by the same corporation that owned Paramount and Paramount Studios. And so that was owned by like, you know, a guy who also, like you said, owned like totally different industries. And
mhm,
so you have to like, so the people who run the corporations, they have to have a profit of 8% per year. Every
right.
year you have to keep growing. And so
Well,
there's just less time
back
for,
to back to like the author's perspective, though, what it really means is now you need to get like uh, an almost finished book, like you were saying, over the threshold, rather than something that catches someone's attention that they will then be willing to work with you with, right?
yeah. And I have two examples of like we why developmental editors exist and are needed. And so January is when I started. I put out my shingle, I put up my website. And so the first two things that I'm working on right now demonstrate this, which the first one is a book that was assigned to me by my former publisher, and they asked me to work on it. I was the in-house editor who I didn't acquire it. I inherited it from a colleague who had left the previous year. So because there's no one on staff who can handle this book, who they hired me to do it from as a freelancer. Um, and the other book that I just started working on is a manuscript that I actually wanted desperately to acquire when, the last year I was at Tor. And because the other people who are above me didn't see it, they didn't see the potential, or they didn't think it was ready, and they also just didn't love it as much as I did. They didn't see the market for it. But um, so she actually contacted me, and she knew I had reluctantly passed on it. And I told her I wanted to buy it. I wasn't allowed, but I'm going to
Right,
work with you to get it to the stage where we're going to sell it. And
right. And I think
so,
that that's comforting to authors too, to know that sometimes editors love what you've done. It's just that it's always a group decision. It's always a very hierarchical decision as well. So not to get discouraged because it might be acquired by that same editor when that editor moves somewhere else, or it might be the no is never no. It's just not right now. And it's very hard as an author to kind of differentiate between, so do I give up on it? Like, is this really good feedback that it's not as good as it should be and it's not competitive? Or is it like this is just like the wrong time? And I actually don't know how you tell. So do you have any ideas?
I think that you have to find an agent that you really like and trust, and that's going to be, I think, your closest publishing relationship. Just at this moment, it used to be that the editor was that person; they would be your advocate through thick and thin. But again, like you know. The powers that be at the corporations are not allowing you, like, let's say you loved as an editor somebody's first book, and it didn't sell to expectations. And so, you're not going to be able to buy the second book, or if you had a two-book deal, the third book. So so that editor is not going to be there anymore. That she's not going to be allowed to, acquire your next book, no matter how much she loves you and your work, if the first two don't hit. So your agent is going to be that person who will hopefully stay with you and sort of have a bigger view of your career and just, be able to sort of maneuver you through this quagmire of
So then
publishing.
talking about this quagmire, like in all this experience, and someone asked, and by the way, everyone, hold your questions because we're going to do Q&A like soon enough. But someone did ask, like, are we just talking about MGY and kids here? And I think that the principles that we're talking about here just apply across the board to publishing. And so one of my big questions I think that everyone here would like to ask is, seeing as it's so competitive and it has to come in and like clear that hurdle, and the hurdle is so high, like off the top of your head, the three things that makes the book fall flat or fall for you, what are the three most common mistakes that
Okay.
authors make and then
Okay.
before they submit the book?
Yeah. First, I do want to say that everything that I said about not being allowed to sort of take the time to work on a manuscript, that was true of adult books before it ever happened to children's and young adults. So it's always been like that after the days of Maxwell Perkins. Okay, so uh, I would get about 300 to 400 agented submissions. So those were already vetted by agents. And then I would buy like maybe 4 or 5 books,
Are you talking per
depending.
year, per month? What are you talking? 300
Per
times?
year, per year. So whatever that math is. So when I would get a submission, the number one reason that I would just pass after the first page, really, was that I didn't love the writing. So it is either that the writing wasn't polished enough, that I didn't think that it was at a level that could compete. So I can maybe see that the agent, some agents were better at this than others, but some agents would send you things that you were totally like, this writing is not up to par, and I don't know why this agent is sending it to me. The other reason that number two reason is that I would just be bored. So it just didn't capture my attention. And so I
And
would
this
just put it.
is, you said the first page, so you need your attention captured in the first page.
Yeah. So, I've been doing this for a while. So basically, I can just sort of look at the first page, flip through the next few pages, and if nothing caught my attention, then I would just pass on that. So those are the two main reasons. Another one is if it was a YA and if it was first person present tense, um, they all started to sound the same to me. Like it lacked sort of a distinctive voice or a style. So those were my three main reasons for passing. But
Did you read query letters as well, or did you go straight to the manuscript?
I did not read query letter. Like I would read the agent's pitch letter, like not carefully, especially if it was long. But I would just like glance at it to see who was sending it to me and what it was. But I wanted to always just sort of react to the words on the page, which is always the most important thing.
Okay, so we're at the halfway mark, so I want to kind of just ask a couple more questions and then open up for Q&A. We did promise that, or I did promise that I'd ask the question about what is happening in publishing right now that's going to affect authors everywhere. And we've talked about the diminution in editorial departments and how nobody is given as much time to foster or like work iteratively on work, or bring authors on. But and that came, I think, in 2008. That there's a big slice of the industry left and never came, and they never hired them back. But we're probably the same number of books. But what about this big six to big five to big four thing? Like, how do you think that's affecting the landscape, and how is that going to play in for authors who are submitting?
Okay, so I think First, I have to say that it's actually Big Five. So I had Big Four everywhere because in 2020 it was announced that Random House was going to acquire Simon and Schuster, and then just earlier this year, a few months ago, the Justice Department is suing the publishers to stop the acquisition for antitrust reasons. So it's technically Big Five still, but I believe that because the last time the Justice Department sued the publishers, they won. So I believe it could possibly still be Big Five, and so anyway, I just wanted to clear that up. But so basically, it's the same thing as in economics. Just everything that's happening in publishing, including all the stuff we're going to get to about diversity and representation and everything, is mirroring. It's the same thing that's happening in society at large. So all those same issues that we're grappling with. And so I was just reading this book called The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee, and she was talking about the decline of the middle class and how the middle class is shrinking while like super rich people and like the poor people are expanding. It's the same thing for manuscripts. So the mid list, it's either going to be the super big books that the publishers go to auction, they spend tons of money, and then they have to throw marketing at it in order to make it profitable. And then there's all the backlist that was published before. And then there's just like the mid list is shrinking. But this has been happening all that, like it just is. Every trend that's happened in publishing is still happening. I think it's just been sped up because of the let's see. Okay, so like technology, the internet, and social media, those are the things that have really sort of accelerated all the trends that have always been in publishing. So I do think that when the companies consolidate, that means that there are fewer markets, and editors are laid off, and they want bigger books in order to sustain and grow, and so they are not gonna maybe buy like debut novels that seem quiet or that have a smaller market. They have to publish like just the biggest books. This is not true of everything because I think publishing, other than the big five, there's still a lot of different publishers and different types of publishing. So it's not dire, but it's just I just want to tell the truth.
It's not dire, it's just depressing.
But this has always been the case ever since I've been in publishing, since the 90s. Like when I got into publishing, there were all these things like, is YA dead? At all the library conferences, is YA dead? And then it had a big boom, and now YA is dead again. So everything's cyclical. There's trends, but there was a huge like the technology before ebooks that caused a huge ruckus were CD-ROMs back in the 90s. People were like up in arms about CD-ROM contracts, and that just was like poofed out. No one cares, right? So what I say about publishing is that it's the worst of times. It's the worst of times. We still survive because humans need books and stories, and they need them to to live and to survive and to create empathy. So I believe we're going to continue on, and we still have to continue on. We have to tell these stories. We have to write.